The widowed rancher was saved, and 3 Apaches declared him their beloved husband. He was a man of routine, tending his land with care and living in harmony with nature. His ranch was modest but well kept, stretching across acres of golden fields where cattle grazed peacefully, and the wind whispered secrets through the tall grass. Life had its challenges, droughts, storms, and harsh winters, but John met each one with quiet strength. Yet through all of it, there had been one constant source of happiness: his wife, Clara. Clara was not just his partner, she was his anchor. Her laughter could fill the quietest room, her kindness could heal the deepest sorrow. Together, they had built a life of love and shared dreams. The small cabin they called home was simple, but it radiated warmth. They spent their evenings by the fireplace, talking about the future, planning for the herd, and dreaming of one day seeing their children run across the fields they so cherished. But life, as John soon learned, could change in the blink of an eye. One particularly harsh winter brought with it a sickness that moved through the small prairie community with terrifying speed. Clara, despite her strong spirit, fell ill. John tried everything he could think of. He tended to her tirelessly, brought herbs and remedies from the nearest town, and kept her warm through nights that seemed colder than ever before. He whispered words of hope into her ear, told her stories of the ranch, and begged her to hold on. But sometimes, no matter how much love and effort one gives, fate has other plans. Clara's strength faded day by day. Her once bright eyes grew tired and heavy, and her laughter became a faint memory. John stayed by her side, holding her hand, sharing her pain, and wishing that he could take her suffering upon himself. The moment she passed, a silence fell over John's world that no words could describe. It was as if the wind had stopped blowing, as if the sun had decided never to rise again. He felt a loneliness that cut deeper than any physical pain, a void that no work or routine could fill. The days that followed were a blur of sorrow and exhaustion. John moved through them mechanically, performing the duties of ranch life but with none of the usual joy. He fed the cattle, repaired fences, and chopped firewood, yet every task felt heavier than the last. Even the simple act of lighting the fireplace brought no comfort. Instead, it reminded him that Clara's warmth was gone. He tried to speak to neighbors, but conversations felt hollow. People offered their condolences, but their words, though well-meaning, could not touch the depth of his grief. Nighttime was the hardest. Alone in the cabin, the walls echoed with memories of Clara, her voice singing softly as she cooked, her fingers brushing his shoulder as they walked through the fields together, her gentle smile greeting him after a long day. John would sit by the fireplace, staring into the dancing flames, imagining she was there beside him. Tears fell freely, and for the first time in his life, he questioned the fairness of the world. He had survived droughts, storms, and bitter cold, but this loss seemed unendurable. Winter stretched on, relentless in its severity. Snow covered the plains, turning familiar paths into a white wilderness. The cold seeped into every corner of the ranch, mirroring the emptiness in John's heart. He realized that survival was no longer just about tending the land or the animals. It was about finding the strength to endure life without Clara. Each morning he forced himself out of bed, dressed in layers, and stepped into the biting wind. He tended to the herd, ensured the cabin was warm, and kept the ranch running, all while carrying the heavy burden of grief. During this time, John began to reflect on his life, his choices, and the fragile nature of happiness. He remembered his first days on the prairie, when everything had seemed possible, when the future had seemed bright and endless. He thought about the dreams he and Clara had shared and wondered how he could continue without her. But deep down, he knew that giving up was not an option. Clara had been strong, and she had always believed in him. Her memory became a quiet source of determination. He would survive, not just for himself, but to honor the life they had built together. Even amidst the sorrow, John found small moments of solace. The soft cry of a calf in the distance reminded him that life, in its stubborn way, went on. The sight of birds returning to the fields hinted at hope and continuity. Occasionally, he would pause and watch the sun rise over the horizon, a reminder that the world still held beauty, even in the darkest times. These moments, brief as they were, became the small threads of light that kept him moving forward. As the months passed, John began to adapt to his new reality. He learned to find comfort in routines, in the rhythm of the land, and in the quiet companionship of his cattle. He repaired fences with a steady hand, fed the herd diligently, and maintained the cabin with care. Each task, though done alone, became a small victory over despair. John's grief did not disappear, it could not, but it transformed. It became a part of him, a reminder of love lost, yet also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Yet, even as John found a fragile balance, he knew that life on the prairie could be unpredictable. Danger often lurked where one least expected it: harsh weather, wild animals, and roaming outlaws. He remained vigilant, his instincts sharpened by months of solitude. Every sound in the distance caught his attention, every shadow seemed a potential threat. But he faced these challenges with the same quiet strength he had always possessed, driven by the memory of Clara and the need to keep the ranch alive. The story of John McAllister's loss is not just a tale of sorrow. It is a story of endurance, of a man learning to navigate the sharp edges of grief while continuing to live fully in a harsh and beautiful land. Each day brought a new challenge, yet each day also brought the possibility of hope. The plains, wide and endless, became both a place of mourning and a sanctuary for healing. John's life, though forever changed, began to take on a new rhythm, one where love, memory, and resilience intertwined to create a path forward. As winter slowly gave way to spring, John noticed small signs of life returning to the prairie. The ice melted from streams, buds appeared on the trees, and the first calves of the season were born. These moments, simple yet profound, reminded him that even after the harshest winters, life finds a way to renew itself. John understood that he, too, must find a way to renew his spirit. He could honor Clara's memory by continuing to care for the ranch, by nurturing the life around him, and by opening his heart to the possibilities that lay ahead. Though the cabin still felt empty and the nights still long, John McAllister began to see the first glimmers of hope. He realized that survival was not just about enduring hardship. It was about embracing life again, finding strength in the smallest joys, and allowing love, even in memory, to guide him forward. His journey had just begun, and though the road ahead was uncertain, John was determined to meet it with courage, resilience, and an open heart. The spring sun had begun to warm the plains, melting the snow and painting the prairie in shades of green and gold. John McAllister had found some comfort in the rhythm of the ranch, but life still felt lonely without Clara. The world seemed quieter now, almost too quiet, and John's thoughts often wandered to the life he had lost. Yet he kept moving, tending to the cattle and repairing the fences, his hands steady even when his heart felt heavy. One morning, as he rode across the open fields checking the herd, John noticed unusual tracks in the soft earth. The prints were too large and irregular to be from any of his cattle or the wild animals he knew. A shiver ran down his spine as he realized that someone, or something, had passed through the ranch during the night. He tightened his grip on the reins and scanned the horizon. There was movement in the distance, a cloud of dust that suggested a group of riders approaching fast. Before John could react, the figures were upon him. Outlaws, men with hard faces and rough clothing, armed with guns and ready to take what they wanted. Panic surged through him, but John tried to stay calm. He knew the land better than anyone and hoped to use it to his advantage. He tried to guide his horse toward the creek, thinking he might be able to hide or escape, but a sudden shot rang out, grazing his shoulder. Pain exploded through his body and his horse bolted, stumbling in the uneven terrain. John fell to the ground, dazed and badly hurt. He felt himself slipping into darkness, unsure if he would survive. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a remarkable thing happened. Out of the trees came a group of figures moving with incredible speed and precision. They surrounded the outlaws with ease, their movements silent but powerful. John watched in disbelief as the men were disarmed and forced to retreat. The rescuers were not townspeople or lawmen, they were Apaches, a small band of warriors who had been observing the land. Among them were 3 sisters, each strong and graceful, their eyes sharp and watchful. The sisters, Ahioka, Weah, and Nayeli, quickly attended to John. They helped him sit up and examined his wounds with careful hands. Using herbs and salves, they cleaned his cuts and wrapped them with strips of cloth. John had never experienced care like this. Their touch was gentle yet confident, their voices calm and soothing. He tried to speak, but the pain and shock made it difficult. One of the sisters, Nayeli, placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered words in a language he did not understand, yet somehow they carried reassurance. For days, John lay in a small shelter the sisters had prepared, barely able to move. They brought him water and food, speaking softly and ensuring he was comfortable. He was amazed by their knowledge of medicine, the way they could tend to his wounds and know exactly what he needed without him having to explain. Slowly, strength returned to his body, and with it, a sense of gratitude he had not felt in months. He realized that these strangers had saved his life, and he owed them more than he could ever repay. During his recovery, John began to learn about the sisters and their people. Ahioka was the eldest, wise and strong, with a quiet authority that commanded respect. Weah, the middle sister, was adventurous and spirited, always moving with energy and curiosity. Nayeli, the youngest, had a gentle heart and a keen mind, often observing things others missed. Together, they lived by the principles of courage, loyalty, and family. They had their own traditions, stories, and ways of seeing the world, and John found himself fascinated by their lives. As John healed, he also began to heal emotionally. The sisters' kindness and strength reminded him of what he had lost, but also showed him that life could still hold beauty and connection. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, sharing stories of the land, teaching John their ways, and listening as he spoke of his ranch, his past, and Clara. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that someone cared deeply for him without asking anything in return. Days turned into weeks, and John's recovery was complete. The sisters taught him how to live in harmony with the land in ways he had never known. He learned to track animals, find edible plants, and move quietly through the woods. They showed him how to respect the earth, how to work with nature instead of against it, and how strength came not only from the body but from patience, knowledge, and understanding. John's heart and mind opened to a new way of life, one that was different from the ranch he had always known, yet equally rich and rewarding. Despite the differences in their worlds, a bond grew between John and the sisters. They respected each other, learned from each other, and slowly, a deep connection formed. The sisters saw in John a kind man, strong yet humble, who had endured great loss but continued to live with courage. John saw in them bravery, wisdom, and love that he had never expected to encounter again. The quiet nights around the fire became moments of trust and understanding, and John began to realize that life could bring second chances in the most unexpected ways. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, John reflected on the events that had brought him here. He had gone from the depths of despair after losing Clara to a place of safety, learning, and connection with people he had once considered strangers. The sisters had saved his life not only physically, but emotionally, giving him hope when he thought hope was gone. He realized that survival was not just about enduring pain, but about being open to help, love, and friendship. The sisters, too, felt the bond growing stronger. They had seen countless people pass through the land, some with greed or fear in their hearts, but John was different. He was honest, kind, and resilient. He had faced loss and hardship with courage, and he treated them with respect, never taking advantage of their care. In a world where trust was fragile, the sisters felt a rare sense of comfort with John. They began to include him in their daily lives, teaching him their songs, their customs, and their ways of celebrating life. As spring blossomed into summer, John found himself fully engaged in this new way of life. The prairie, once a place of sorrow, had become a space of learning, growth, and connection. He worked alongside the sisters, helping with daily tasks, sharing meals, and listening to their stories of past generations. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new moments of joy. The bond between them deepened, not just as rescuer and rescued, but as friends, companions, and eventually, something more profound. John realized that the encounter with the Apache sisters had changed the course of his life forever. He had come to the plains as a grieving, broken man, but he would leave this chapter stronger, wiser, and ready for what the future might hold. The sisters had shown him that family was not only defined by blood, that love could exist in many forms, and that life could still be beautiful even after the deepest sorrow. By the time John fully recovered, he had not only regained his physical strength but had discovered a new purpose. The ranch still called to him, but now he understood that survival and happiness required more than hard work. It required connection, trust, and the courage to open one's heart again. He looked at the sisters with gratitude and admiration, knowing that their paths had crossed for a reason. Their care had saved him, but their presence had given him life once more. After weeks of healing and learning from the sisters, John McAllister began to realize that his life was no longer the same. The loneliness that had once consumed him seemed to lift, replaced by a growing sense of purpose and connection. The Apache sisters, Ahioka, Wea, and Nayeli, had become his teachers, his guides, and in ways he never expected, his friends. Each day with them brought new lessons, not only about surviving on the land, but about understanding life from a perspective that was deeply respectful of nature, community, and the bonds between people. John's mornings began before dawn. He would rise to the soft light spilling across the prairie, accompanied by the sounds of birds and the gentle rustling of the wind. The sisters were already awake, preparing for the day. Ahioka would check traps and gather herbs, Wea would tend to small fires and tools, and Nayeli would carefully examine the animals or organize supplies. John quickly learned that each task, though simple, carried meaning. Nothing was done hastily. Every action was part of a rhythm that sustained life and honored the land. The sisters taught John the importance of observation. Walking through the forest or across the fields, he learned to notice the smallest details, the tracks of animals in the dirt, the way certain plants leaned toward sunlight, the signs of changes in the weather. They showed him how to listen to the wind and the birds, how to sense danger long before it arrived. John, who had always relied on strength and skill alone, discovered that patience, awareness, and respect were equally powerful tools. One of the lessons that struck him most profoundly was the sisters' knowledge of medicine. Ahioka taught him how to identify herbs that could heal wounds, ease pain, or strengthen the body. Wea showed him how to prepare poultices and teas, while Nayeli explained the ways in which different plants work together to create remedies. John found himself fascinated. He had tended to the ranch's animals for years, but he had never truly understood the connection between the earth and healing. Each plant, each flower, and each root seemed to hold its own story, a story that had been passed down through generations. As John learned these skills, he also began to understand the sisters' values. Their lives were guided by courage, loyalty, and an unspoken code of respect for all living things. They shared stories of their ancestors, tales of bravery, sacrifice, and wisdom that shaped who they were. John listened intently, absorbing not just the words but the lessons hidden within them. He realized that life was more than survival. It was about honor, community, and the love one showed to those around them. The sisters also taught John practical skills. He learned to build shelters from natural materials, how to start a fire without matches, and how to track animals for food without causing unnecessary harm. He practiced with patience, sometimes making mistakes, but always guided by the sisters' gentle correction. Each new skill made him feel more capable, more connected to the land, and more a part of the small community he had stumbled upon. Beyond the lessons, John began to notice subtle changes within himself. His heart, once heavy with grief for Clara, started to feel lighter. The sisters' presence brought warmth back into his life, a warmth he had thought lost forever. Their laughter, their stories, and their care reminded him that human connection could heal even the deepest wounds. He began to hope again, not just for survival, but for joy, for companionship, and perhaps for love. Evenings were a time of reflection and learning. The sisters would gather around the fire, singing songs that told of their people's history or sharing quiet moments of storytelling. John would listen, often contributing his own stories of life on the ranch, tales of Clara, and the experiences that had shaped him. They listened with interest and empathy, and he felt a sense of being truly understood, a rare feeling he had not experienced since Clara's passing. One day, while walking through the fields, John noticed a young deer trapped in a shallow pit. His first instinct was to rush forward and pull it out, but Wea gently stopped him. "Wait," she said, "we must be careful. We must help without frightening it, without causing it harm." Following her guidance, John learned to approach the animal slowly, speaking in soft tones and using gentle movements. Together, they freed the deer, which bounded away into the forest, unhurt. John felt a profound sense of accomplishment and wonder. He realized that life was not just about taking what one needed, but about giving back, protecting, and respecting the balance of nature. Through these experiences, John's relationship with the sisters grew deeper. Ahioka admired his determination and humility. Wea appreciated his curiosity and willingness to learn, and Naeli was drawn to his kindness and thoughtfulness. The connection they shared was quiet at first, built on trust and respect, but it was growing steadily. John, who had once thought love was lost to him forever, began to feel emotions he had not expected, a gentle warmth, a sense of belonging, and the first stirrings of affection. John also began to share more of himself with the sisters. He spoke of his ranch, his life with Clara, and the struggles he faced after her death. They listened without judgment, offering comfort, advice, or simply silent companionship. In return, he learned about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Each story, each shared moment, created a bond that was deeper than friendship, stronger than simple companionship. It was a connection that was based on mutual respect, care, and understanding. One afternoon, John accompanied the sisters on a journey to gather herbs near the river. The sun shone brightly, the water sparkled, and the world felt alive. They moved together in harmony, each step deliberate, each action thoughtful. John felt a sense of peace he had not known since Clara's passing. The sisters laughed, teased, and encouraged him, and he found himself smiling freely, without guilt or sorrow. It was in these moments, amidst the beauty of nature and the warmth of shared experience, that John realized life could be joyful again. As summer progressed, John became not just a student but a participant in the sisters' way of life. He helped with daily tasks, shared in the responsibilities of the group, and began to contribute ideas and solutions. His skills, knowledge of the land, and experience with the ranch proved valuable, and the sisters respected his input. John felt a sense of purpose he had never felt before. He was no longer just surviving. He was thriving, growing, and learning to love life once more. Yet the transformation was not only practical but emotional. John's grief, though still present, had softened. The sorrow for Clara remained, but it no longer defined him. The sisters' guidance, care, and companionship showed him that love could take many forms, that life could continue, and that happiness could be found even after great loss. He began to understand that the heart had an incredible capacity to heal, to grow, and to embrace new possibilities. In quiet moments, John reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had been lost, broken by grief, and struggling to survive alone. Yet fate had led him to the Apache sisters, whose kindness, wisdom, and strength had saved him. Through their teachings, he had not only regained his health but had discovered a new way of living, a new way of seeing the world, and a new way of understanding himself. He realized that life was not a straight path, but a series of experiences, each offering lessons, challenges, and opportunities for growth. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, John felt a growing sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. He was no longer the widowed rancher consumed by grief. He was a man reborn, learning to live fully, love deeply, and embrace the unknown. The sisters had given him more than life-saving care. They had given him a second chance, a chance to heal, to learn, and to open his heart again. By the end of the summer, John McAllister was no longer just a visitor in the sisters' lives. He had become a part of their community, a trusted companion, and someone who shared their values and dreams. The bond between them had grown stronger, based on mutual respect, shared experiences, and the quiet understanding that true connection was forged not in words alone, but in actions, trust, and care. John's journey of healing was far from over, but he now faced the future with courage, hope, and a heart ready to embrace life once more. As the seasons shifted and the days grew longer, John McAllister felt a change deep within himself. The prairie, once a place of sorrow and solitude, had become a place of life, learning, and unexpected joy. The Apache sisters, Ahioka, Wea, and Nayeli, had transformed his world, guiding him not only through the challenges of survival, but also through the quiet, powerful lessons of the heart. John had learned their ways, respected their traditions, and felt a connection that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink, the sisters gathered John near a small fire they had built. The air was calm, and the prairie seemed to hold its breath. There was a seriousness in their expressions, a quiet intensity that John had never seen before. He could feel that something important was about to happen, though he did not yet understand what it might be. Ahioka, the eldest, spoke first. Her voice was steady, carrying a weight of authority and respect. She told John how much they valued him, not just for the help he had given in daily tasks, but for the kindness, courage, and integrity he had shown since arriving. She spoke of the bond they shared, a bond that had grown stronger with each passing day, and the trust they had come to place in him. John listened, his heart beating faster, sensing the significance of her words. Wea then stepped forward, her eyes shining with emotion. She described how she had come to admire his determination, his willingness to learn, and the gentle way he treated both people and animals. She spoke of how rare it was to find someone so honest, brave, and compassionate, and how their connection had grown into something meaningful for all of them. John felt a surge of emotion. He had known friendship and he had known love, but this was something different, something that stirred hope and wonder deep within him. Nayeli, the youngest, finally spoke. Her voice was soft but full of feeling, carrying a sense of sincerity that touched John's soul. She shared how they had each come to care for him deeply, how their hearts had been moved by his resilience, his humility, and the way he had embraced their lives and traditions. Nayeli's words were filled with honesty, and for the first time, John realized that the feelings between them were not just affection or friendship, they were love. A love that was rare, unexpected, and powerful. John could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had arrived at this place broken, wounded, and alone. He had thought that his capacity for love had ended with Clara. And yet, here were three remarkable women, each with their own strength and wisdom, declaring that he had become the center of their hearts. The weight of their words, their sincerity, and the courage it took to speak them filled him with awe. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, not from sorrow, but from a deep and overwhelming gratitude for the gift of this second chance at love. The sisters did not expect John to respond immediately. They knew that matters of the heart required reflection, time, and understanding. They gave him space to process their feelings, to consider what this declaration meant for him and for their shared lives. John spent the night by the fire, staring at the stars, thinking about Clara, about his grief, and about the unexpected path that had brought him to this moment. He realized that love could take many forms, that the heart was capable of expanding far beyond what he had imagined, and that happiness could be found even after the deepest sorrow. Over the following days, John and the sisters grew even closer. They spent time sharing tasks on the land, exploring the fields, and preparing meals together. Yet, there was a new depth to their interactions, a subtle tension of unspoken understanding and shared emotion. John began to notice the small gestures, the way Ahioka would pause to ensure he was comfortable, the playful teasing from Weah that made him smile, and the quiet, thoughtful glances from Nayeli that spoke volumes. Every moment, every touch, every shared look carried meaning, reinforcing the bond that had been declared around the fire. One afternoon, the sisters decided it was time to formalize their feelings in a ceremony that honored both Apache traditions and John's own heritage. The preparation was meticulous, filled with symbolic gestures and deep respect for the earth, their ancestors, and the connection they shared. They dressed in traditional attire, decorated the space with elements from nature, and invited John to participate fully, ensuring that the ritual was meaningful for all involved. John felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. He had never experienced anything like this before, but he trusted the sisters completely and felt privileged to be a part of such an intimate and sacred event. During the ceremony, each sister spoke from the heart. They expressed their commitment, their care, and their desire to share their lives with John. They did not demand, they did not pressure. They simply offered their love freely with the hope that he would accept it. John, moved beyond words, responded with honesty and sincerity. He acknowledged the deep respect, admiration, and affection he felt for each of them. He shared how their presence had transformed his life, how they had taught him the meaning of courage, patience, and trust, and how they had opened his heart once more after a period of unimaginable grief. The ceremony was simple yet profound. There were no grand gestures or lavish displays, only the quiet, powerful connection between four people whose lives had intersected in the most unexpected of ways. The sisters held his hands, one after the other, and John felt a warmth and completeness he had never thought possible. In that moment, he understood that love was not limited by circumstance or convention. It was not bound by the past or constrained by expectation. It was a force that could grow in unexpected places, transform hearts, and create families in ways that transcended tradition. As the sun set on that day, John felt a sense of peace and joy that he had not known in years. The grief that had once defined his existence seemed distant now, replaced by the promise of shared laughter, work, and companionship. The sisters, too, felt a profound relief and happiness. Their hearts had found a home in John, just as his heart had found a place with them. Together they had discovered a new kind of love, one that was built on trust, respect, shared experience, and the courage to embrace life fully. Life after the declaration was filled with small, meaningful moments. John and the sisters worked together on the ranch, celebrated the changing seasons, and supported each other through challenges. They shared meals, stories, and quiet evenings by the fire, each day reinforcing the bond that had been formally recognized. John learned to anticipate their needs, to communicate without words, and to appreciate the beauty of shared responsibility. In return, the sisters taught him the subtleties of their culture, the significance of their rituals, and the importance of balance in life and love. Over time, the community around the ranch began to notice the transformation. John, once a solitary and grieving widower, now carried himself with confidence, joy, and a renewed sense of purpose. The sisters were respected and admired for their courage, wisdom, and generosity. Together, they created a life that blended their cultures, their traditions, and their hearts. Their partnership was not without challenges, but it was strengthened by mutual respect, love, and the shared understanding that each person's happiness was intertwined with the other's. In quiet moments, John often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had led him here. He had begun as a man broken by grief, struggling to survive on a harsh prairie. He had faced danger, despair, and loneliness. And yet, through the kindness, wisdom, and love of 3 remarkable women, he had been transformed. He had learned that life could offer second chances, that love could exist in many forms, and that the heart had an incredible capacity for healing and growth. By the end of this part of his journey, John McAllister was no longer just a widowed rancher. He had become part of a family built on trust, courage, and love. The sisters had not only saved his life, they had saved his heart. Together, they faced the future with hope, strength, and a profound understanding of what it meant to be connected, not just by circumstance, but by choice and affection. John knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would meet them with the support of those who loved him, and with the knowledge that life, even after great loss, could be full of joy, meaning, and love. Life on the prairie had changed in ways John McAllister could never have imagined. The ranch, once a place of loneliness and sorrow, had become a home filled with laughter, warmth, and the quiet strength of family. The 3 Apache sisters, Ahioka, Wea, and Nayeli, had transformed not only his life but also his heart. Together, they had forged a bond built on trust, love, and shared experience, and John felt a sense of belonging he had thought lost forever. With the seasons passing, the ranch prospered. John applied the lessons he had learned from the sisters, blending his own experience with their knowledge of the land. The cattle thrived under his care, crops grew in fertile soil, and the small cabin they shared became a hub of activity and comfort. Each day was filled with purpose, whether it was tending the animals, repairing fences, or gathering herbs with the sisters. Yet beyond the work, there was a deeper satisfaction, the knowledge that they were building a life together, a life defined by cooperation, respect, and love. The sisters had taken their roles seriously as partners, not only in the daily work, but also in nurturing a sense of community and harmony. Ahioka guided the planning and organization of the ranch, ensuring that resources were used wisely and that each task was done efficiently. Wea brought energy and creativity, helping with innovations in animal care and land management, while Nayeli's gentle and thoughtful nature kept everyone mindful of the balance between work and life, ensuring that no one's spirit became weary. John admired them, not just for their skill and wisdom, but for the way they worked together as a family, respecting each other's strengths and supporting one another through challenges. The bond between John and the sisters deepened as the years passed. They celebrated the changing seasons with small ceremonies and shared meals, honoring the land and their connection to it. They laughed together, worked together, and supported one another through both joys and difficulties. John had learned patience, humility, and the strength that came from relying on others, while offering one's own strength in return. The sisters had taught him that love was not a possession, but a partnership, an understanding that each person's happiness was intertwined with the others. Despite the hardships that life on the prairie could bring, droughts, storms, and occasional threats from outsiders, their family remained united. John's experiences with danger earlier in his life had taught him caution, and the sisters' wisdom had taught him strategy and foresight. Together, they faced challenges with courage and resilience. When a violent storm once threatened to wash away part of the ranch, John and the sisters worked tirelessly through the night to protect the animals and repair damage, relying on both skill and teamwork. By morning, the ranch was safe, and their sense of accomplishment and unity had strengthened even further. The sisters also brought a richness of culture and tradition that John had never known. They shared stories of their ancestors, songs that spoke of bravery and love, and lessons about living in harmony with the land. John learned to appreciate these traditions, participating with respect and sincerity. He began to see the world through their eyes, understanding that life was about more than survival. It was about honoring those who came before, nurturing those who were present, and preparing for those who would come after. These lessons resonated deeply, reminding him of the importance of legacy, community, and connection. Over time, their unique family became known in the surrounding region. Neighbors and travelers spoke of the widowed rancher who had been saved by the courage of 3 Apache sisters, and how together they had created a life that combined wisdom, hard work, and love. Some were curious, others skeptical, but most admired the harmony and strength of their household. John found that he no longer felt the need to explain or justify their family. The happiness, care, and unity they shared spoke for itself. As the years went by, John and the sisters continued to thrive. Children from nearby families would occasionally visit, learning about ranch life, the land, and the traditions the sisters shared. John often told them stories of his early life, his hardships, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke of Clara, not with sorrow alone, but with gratitude for the love they had shared, and he shared the story of how the sisters had saved him and transformed his life. The children listened wide-eyed, inspired by the courage, kindness, and resilience that defined his journey. John often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the grief that had once consumed him, the loneliness that had left him desperate, and the fear that he would never love again. And yet, through the care and courage of Ahioka, Wea, and Naeli, he had found life anew. They had saved him not only physically but emotionally, teaching him that the heart could heal and grow even after unimaginable loss. He understood now that love could take many forms, and that family could be chosen, nurtured, and strengthened by care, respect, and commitment. The sisters, too, found joy and fulfillment in their shared life with John. Ahioka appreciated his guidance, patience, and the way he supported them in every endeavor. Wea delighted in his humor, intelligence, and willingness to learn. Naeli cherished his kindness, attentiveness, and the respect he showed for all living things. Together, they celebrated their love not as a fleeting passion, but as a lasting partnership that honored each person's individuality while embracing unity and connection. The ranch flourished not just as land or livelihood, but as a symbol of their unity. Their story spread through the region, inspiring others to consider the strength found in cooperation, trust, and shared love. John realized that the true wealth of the ranch was not measured in cattle, crops, or money, but in the bonds that held their family together. It was in the quiet moments of care, the shared laughter, and the mutual respect that created a life worth living. As the years passed, the family faced new challenges, but they faced them together. Illnesses, harsh weather, and occasional threats tested their strength, yet the bond between John and the sisters never wavered. They relied on each other's skills, wisdom, and courage to overcome difficulties, learning that resilience was not only about physical endurance, but also about emotional strength and unwavering trust in one another. John often sat by the fire at night, reflecting on the incredible journey he had undertaken. He had come to the prairie as a man broken by grief, nearly lost to the harshness of life and the weight of sorrow. He had faced danger, uncertainty, and the crushing loneliness of a widower. And yet, through the intervention, care, and love of three extraordinary women, he had found life, purpose, and a family that gave him joy beyond measure. The ranch, the land, and the family he had built together had become a legacy, a living testament to courage, love, and the transformative power of human connection. By the time John was older, the story of his life had become legend in the local area. People spoke of the widowed rancher who had been saved by three Apache sisters, and how together they had built a life of love, learning, and resilience. Children were inspired by the tales, adults admired their strength, and travelers often left with a renewed understanding of the possibilities of compassion and unity. Yet for John and the sisters, the true reward was simple: the daily life they shared, the trust and love that guided them, and the knowledge that they had found something far more precious than wealth or recognition: a family bound by choice, respect, and heart. In his final reflections, John understood that life's greatest lessons often came from unexpected places. He had faced loss, danger, and despair, yet these hardships had led him to a life richer than he could have imagined. The three sisters had saved him not only from physical harm but from the despair that threatened to consume him. They had shown him that love could exist in many forms, that life could offer second chances, and that the heart's capacity to heal and grow was nearly limitless. As the sun set over the prairie, casting golden light across the fields, John looked at Ahioka, Wea, and Nayeli. He saw in their faces courage, wisdom, and love. He felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them together, for the lessons they had shared, and for the life they had built as a family. John realized that while tragedy had once defined him, love, resilience, and unity now shaped the story of his life. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a sanctuary, a home, and a symbol of what could be achieved when hearts opened to trust, care, and love. Together, they faced the future with confidence, knowing that whatever challenges came their way, they would overcome them as a family. Their story became a living testament to the power of human connection, the strength of love that transcends loss, and the remarkable ways in which life can transform when people open their hearts to one another. John McAllister, the widowed rancher, had found not only survival but a legacy of unity, joy, and lasting love, one that would endure far beyond his own lifetime.